You've heard this story 100 times. The US blocks its most advanced AI chips from reaching China, the ultimate chokehold in the global AI race. But here's the part almost nobody is covering. When the US finally said yes, when it actually approved the sale of one of NVIDIA's most powerful chips to Chinese companies, Beijing said no. China's own government blocked its own tech giants from buying it. On purpose. Not because the chip was too weak, because it was too good, on America's terms. And the reason why tells you more about how China actually plans to win this race than any export ban ever could.
To understand this, you need to see just how chaotic the last 14 months have actually been. April 2025, the US bans NVIDIA's H20 chip, a scaled-down chip specifically designed to be legal for China. NVIDIA writes off $5.5 billion in unsellable inventory overnight. A tax on its own export ban. But here's the twist. Chinese authorities turned around and told their own companies, don't buy them. Security concerns, they said.
Then, in December 2025, Washington goes even further and approves something bigger, the H200, a genuinely powerful chip. By May 2026, 10 major Chinese firms, including Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, and JD.com, get official US licenses to buy up to 75,000 chips each. That's a potential flood of hundreds of thousands of elite GPUs into China's AI economy. And as of that same month, not one of them had shipped. So why would any company turn down the world's best AI hardware, sitting right there, fully legal, ready to ship? Because Beijing has run this exact play before, and it worked.
Rewind to the 2000s. Visa and MasterCard wanted into China's massive card payments market. Beijing said no, not because the American networks were bad. They were clearly better. China blocked them anyway, for over a decade, specifically to give its own homegrown network, UnionPay, time and market space to grow up without competition. China lost a World Trade Organization case over it in 2012. Even then, it opened the market at a snail's pace. MasterCard didn't get an operating license until 2020 and didn't process an actual domestic transaction until 2024. Visa, as of this year, is still waiting. By the time the door finally opened, UnionPay was already a fully mature global competitor. The delay wasn't a failure. It was the strategy.
China is running the identical playbook with chips right now. Let Huawei's Ascend chips absorb the demand today, even though they're less powerful, so that in 5 or 10 years, Chinese AI isn't standing on a foundation that Washington can pull out from under it overnight, which, as we just saw with the H20, is a very real risk. You get banned once and unbanned 3 months later with a new tax attached. Why would you build your entire industry on top of that kind of unpredictability if you had any other option? But playing the long game has a real immediate cost, and it's showing. Chinese AI labs are currently running months behind the American frontier. DeepSeek's newest model, V4, isn't running on NVIDIA hardware at all. It's been specifically re-engineered to run on Huawei's Ascend chips. That's a genuine engineering achievement. It's also proof of how much extra work Chinese labs are burning just to stay in the race on domestic silicon. Work that American labs simply don't have to do.
Meanwhile, in the US, OpenAI and other labs keep shipping faster, more capable models on hardware that just works out of the box, backed by NVIDIA's CUDA software ecosystem, a 15-year head start that Huawei's rougher, harder-to-program alternative still hasn't matched. So this month, July 2026, something shifted. The information reports that Beijing is now weighing a partial reversal, not a full opening, a capped, limited allowance, letting its AI giants import H200 chips, but at a ceiling reportedly around 200,000 units combined across every company. That's less than half of what those companies originally requested when the licenses were first granted. China isn't just buying time with Huawei's current chips, it's betting on a genuinely different way to build the next generation of them.
In May 2026, Huawei's chief chip architect unveiled something called logic folding at a semiconductor conference in Shanghai. The pitch? Instead of shrinking transistors smaller and smaller, the approach that requires ASML's export-band EUV lithography machines, stack the chip's layers vertically, like folding a circuit in on itself, to move data faster without needing the machines America has cut them off from.
Now, a word of caution here. That's Huawei's own claim at their own conference, and no independent lab has verified those density numbers yet. Take it as a serious research direction, not a confirmed result. But even as an unverified claim, it tells you where Chinese engineering is actually pointed, not toward begging for American chips forever, but toward inventing a path around the exact choke point the US built. And here's the twist inside the twist that makes this whole story messier than US wins or China wins.
While Beijing publicly blocks direct chip imports, multiple reports show Chinese companies are getting NVIDIA computing power anyway, just not by importing the chips themselves. Instead, firms like ByteDance and Alibaba are reportedly renting access to NVIDIA-powered data centers physically located in Singapore and Malaysia. Completely legal, no chips cross the Chinese border. The compute just gets used remotely. It's called the cloud loophole, and it's become such a live concern that in May 2026, the U.S. Commerce Department moved to require export licenses for chips going to any company headquartered in China, even if the actual servers sit in a different country entirely. That's how seriously Washington is taking this workaround.
So, zoom out. Who's actually ahead here? If you're measuring by raw model performance today, the US is still clearly in front. Chinese models remain months behind the frontier, and that gap is real. But if you're measuring by long-term independence, by who's less exposed to a single policy decision in Washington, the picture flips. Brookings, one of the most respected foreign policy think tanks in the US, put it bluntly this year. American chip companies now have effectively zero market share in China's domestic AI chip market, with no realistic path back to where they were. Not because China can't buy the chips, because it's decided deliberately not to depend on them.
That's not a country losing a trade war. That's a country choosing to be slower now in exchange for being unshakable later. Even President Trump, after meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping this year, seemed to acknowledge exactly what's happening. Asked why China hadn't bought the H200 chips his own administration approved, he said, quote, "They chose not to. They want to try and develop their own." That's about as clean a summary of this entire situation as you'll get, straight from the person who approved the chip sale in the first place.
So here's the real question this story raises. In a race that everyone assumes rewards speed, the fastest model, the fastest chip, the fastest rollout, what happens when one competitor decides speed isn't actually the point? That independence is worth more than a head start? We won't know the answer for years, but the first real test of who's right might already be underway. Do you think China's patience pays off? Or is NVIDIA's 15-year software lead simply too big to close? Tell me what you think in the comments, and subscribe to World Scale. We break down stories like this every week.